What if everyone who claims to love you only loves your money? Would you dare to risk everything, your wealth, your family, even your dignity, just to find out the truth? Viewers, stay with me, because in this story, one billionaire's decision to test love will cost him more than he ever imagined. Daniel Oak, one of the richest men in the city, sat in the velvet silence of a private lounge with his closest friend, Chemo. The air was heavy, but Chemo's words cut through it like a blade. "Danny," Chemo said, smirking, "open your eyes. The woman who swears she loves you, the charities chanting your name, the applause in those halls. None of it is real. Take away the money and watch them scatter." Daniel's jaw tightened. He wanted to fight back, but Chemo pressed harder. "Even your daughter, they bully her at school, not for who she is, but because of what you own. You think that's love?" Silence. Daniel's hand trembled on his glass. He replayed Chemo's words in his head. Could it be true? Were his victories just illusions bought with cash? Finally, Daniel leaned forward, his voice low. "If you're right, then let's test it. But if you're wrong," he paused, a storm flickering in his eyes. "I'll know who my enemies are." Chemo grinned. "Then we start tonight." But Daniel didn't realize this so-called test would break more than his fortune. It would break his heart. The morning papers screamed, "Shock collapse of Daniel Oak's business empire." The city buzzed. People whispered on the streets, boardrooms trembled, and cameras rolled outside his gates. At first, the calls came in fast. Old allies, charity leaders, even a few business rivals. Their voices carried sympathy. "Stay strong, Daniel. This storm will pass." Some even came to his mansion, patting his back, promising loyalty. For a brief moment, Daniel almost smiled. Maybe Chemo was wrong. Maybe love and friendship did go deeper than money. But days passed. The visits slowed. The calls grew shorter. One charity sent a letter, quietly postponing an event he was meant to sponsor. A bank officer who once welcomed him with red carpets now avoided his eyes, murmuring about policy changes. At a private gala, where he was once the center of every table, Daniel noticed something chilling. His chair had been moved to the corner. The men he once lifted to greatness toasted without him. Smiles that looked genuine days ago now carried pity and distance. That night, Daniel poured himself a drink, staring at the silence of his phone. The same friends who promised, "We're with you," had already begun to slip away. And deep inside, Daniel knew this was only the beginning. The headlines shifted overnight. Daniel Oak under investigation for fraud. Court orders assets frozen. The words spread like wildfire, and the sympathy he once received dried up like rain on desert sand. At first, a few friends still called. "Daniel, I know this can't be true. You'll clear your name." Their voices sounded hopeful, but underneath he could hear it, the doubt. Then came the silence. Invitations to conferences stopped arriving. His name was quietly removed from a charity's website. A longtime business partner, who once called him brother, told the press, "We had no idea what Daniel was doing with people's money." In court, Daniel sat in the front row, cameras flashing in his face. Strangers he had helped build fortunes glared at him, whispering scammer, fraud, thief. Even the judge's words, though part of the act, cut like glass. All remaining properties to be confiscated pending trial. When Daniel returned home, he expected his family's comfort. Instead, he found cold eyes. His wife looked at him as though he were a stranger. His teenage son muttered under his breath, "I can't show my face in school anymore because of you." That night, Daniel sat in darkness, the weight of betrayal pressing harder. The world had turned against him, and his own family was next. The scandal spread like poison. Neighbors who once waved proudly now crossed the street when Daniel walked past. His face, once plastered on charity billboards, was now on gossip blogs with the word fraud stamped over it. But nothing cut deeper than the silence at home. His son avoided his gaze, storming into his room without a word. His daughter asked, "Daddy, why are people calling you a thief?" Daniel swallowed hard, unable to answer. His wife, Ada, was worse. She stopped waiting for him at the table. She answered calls in whispers, turning her back. One evening, as Daniel reached for her hand, she pulled away. "I didn't sign up for this shame, Daniel. Look at us. We're finished." He tried the banks, men who once begged him to keep accounts with them. Now, they offered polite rejections. "We regret to inform you, policies prevent us from approving your loan at this time." Even his oldest banker, who had toasted his success for decades, refused to look him in the eye. Daniel returned home, papers in hand, staring at the woman he once trusted most. She looked at him with disgust, as if he were nothing more than a burden. That night, in the same house that once rang with laughter, Daniel realized he was a stranger in his own home. And yet, the worst betrayal had not even begun. The next morning, Daniel insisted on driving himself, hoping the fresh air would clear his thoughts. The city was quiet, the streets still wet from last night's rain. Then, out of nowhere, a truck swerved into his lane. Tires screeched, metal twisted, glass shattered. His car spun out of control and slammed into a barrier. When Daniel opened his eyes again, it was to the blinding lights of a hospital room. His body felt heavy, his legs numb. The doctor's voice was steady but cold. "Mr. Oak, the accident has damaged your spine. I'm afraid you'll never walk again." The words sank like stones in his chest. Ada, his wife, gasped dramatically, clutching her mouth, but her eyes held no tears. Chemo stood beside her, his hand resting just a little too long on her shoulder. Daniel noticed, even in his haze. He was wheeled back home days later, confined to a chair that felt like a prison. Ada's voice turned sharp, her pity souring into disdain. "What use is a man who can't even stand?" she hissed, pouring water carelessly on the floor beside him. Daniel lowered his eyes, swallowing the humiliation. And yet, behind that silence, one truth burned. The accident, the doctor's words, the wheelchair, every part of it had been staged. Life in the wheelchair was supposed to be temporary, a mask for Daniel's grand test. But inside his home, the mask turned into torment. Ada no longer pretended to care. She barked orders at the staff, ignoring Daniel's presence. When he asked for water one night, she poured it carelessly into his lap. "You can't even lift a glass anymore. Useless." Her words stung deeper than any injury. Chemo, the friend who had once sworn loyalty, began visiting more often. At first, Daniel thought it was pity. But soon, whispers and laughter filled the bedroom he once shared with his wife. Doors closed behind him, only to open later with Ada smiling, her clothes disheveled. From his chair, Daniel watched in silence, every insult carving a deeper scar. Once, he heard Ada mutter to Chemo, "He's finished. You're the man of this house now." And yet, in his darkest hour, there was a light. His aging mother would still wipe his brow, his father would still steady his wheelchair and say softly, "Son, wealth comes and goes, but you are ours. Always." Daniel realized that when everything else was stripped away, only his parents' love remained untouched. But even they would soon face humiliation, as whispers about their son spread through the city. The streets spoke louder than the newspapers. Vendors muttered when Daniel's parents passed. Old friends at church shifted uneasily, whispering, "That's the mother of the fraud. That's his father." One afternoon, Daniel's mother came home with tear-streaked cheeks. "They called me a liar's mother," she whispered, her voice breaking. His father tried to stay strong, but Daniel saw his hands tremble as he folded the evening paper with his son's face stamped across it. Scammer, cheat, fraudster. From his wheelchair, Daniel felt the weight of guilt heavier than steel. This was supposed to be a test, but now it was punishing the very people who had never wavered in love. Ada added to the torment. "Your poor parents," she sneered one night. "Even they are ashamed of you. Do you see now, Daniel? Everything you touch has turned to disgrace." Chemo laughed beside her, his arm draped casually over her chair. Daniel said nothing. He couldn't. His silence was his shield, though inside he was burning. Yet in the quiet of the night, his father sat by his side, whispering, "Son, don't break. Money fades. Honor can be restored. But love remains." Daniel closed his eyes, torn between ending the game or pushing it further. And the next stage of his test would drag his soul to the edge. It was a rainy evening when Daniel heard the sound of laughter echoing down the hallway. From his wheelchair, he rolled quietly toward the bedroom door, the very room that once symbolized love and vows. The door was half open. Inside, Ada lay in the bed Daniel once shared with her, Chemo beside her. They didn't flinch. They didn't even hide. When Ada finally noticed him, she sat up, her voice sharp as a knife. "Daniel, stop staring. You brought this on yourself. You're no man anymore. Just a cripple living off memories." Chemo chuckled, his arm around her shoulders. "You should be grateful we even let you stay in this house," he sneered. Daniel's hands gripped his wheels until his knuckles turned white. Every insult, every humiliation, every ounce of betrayal slammed into him at once. He wanted to shout, to rage, but his silence was heavier than words. Ada stood, walking toward him, her eyes blazing. She poured a glass of water over his head, whispering coldly, "You're nothing without your money." Then she turned back to Chemo, laughing as if Daniel no longer existed. In that moment, Daniel understood. His wife and his closest friend had buried the man he once was. But the test wasn't over. The world still had one more lesson to teach him. The mansion was no longer his home. It was his prison. Ada and Chemo moved through it like owners, their laughter echoing through halls that once carried his triumphs. The staff, once loyal, avoided him. Some even smirked when Ada mocked him, as if they too believed he was nothing now. One night, Daniel sat alone in his wheelchair by the window, watching the rain blur the city lights. His reflection stared back at him, frail, broken, stripped of dignity. For the first time, doubt pierced his heart. Was chemo right all along? Was love only an illusion tied to wealth? His phone, once buzzing endlessly with calls and praise, sat silent on the table. Weeks had passed without a single word from the allies he had raised, the charities he had fed, or the women who had sworn devotion. And yet, just as the weight of despair crushed him, a gentle knock broke the silence. His mother stepped in, holding a bowl of soup. Her voice was trembling but steady. "Son, eat something. No matter what the world says, you are ours. Always." Tears burned Daniel's eyes. At that moment, he realized every mask had fallen, and only genuine love, his parents, remained. But soon, the truth behind the entire staged fall would have to come to light, and it would change everything. Weeks later, in a quiet press room, Daniel Oak appeared once more, this time not in a wheelchair, not broken, but standing tall. Cameras flashed wildly. Gasps filled the room. The same people who had called him fraud and scammer leaned forward, stunned. Ada froze, her face drained of color, while whispers rippled through the hall. Daniel's voice carried steady authority. "For months, you believed I was ruined. You believed I was a fraud. You believed I was crippled, useless, finished. But all of it, every headline, every scandal, every whisper, was staged." Murmurs swelled. Then, to Ada's shock, Chemo rose from his seat and walked calmly to Daniel's side. His expression was no longer mocking. It was firm, loyal. Daniel continued. "This man, my oldest friend, played his role to perfection. He mocked me. He pushed me. He even stood by silently while I suffered. But he did it because I asked him to. Because I needed the truth." Gasps filled the room. Ada's eyes widened. Chemo's presence beside Daniel was undeniable proof of his loyalty. Daniel's voice grew heavier. "And the truth is this. When wealth vanishes, so do false smiles. The charities, the friends, even family walked away. But my parents and one loyal friend, they remained. Let this be a lesson. Gold buys applause, but only truth reveals who truly stands with you." Ada dropped her gaze in shame as Daniel and Chemo walked out together, leaving behind silence and the wreckage of every false bond.